Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the December edition of NORA Oil Tech Talk Live, and my co-host, Alan Mercurio, who I'll let introduce himself.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Alan Mercurio from Oil Tech Talk, and pleased to mention and want to thank that tonight I'm actually live from the Pennsylvania Petroleum Association's Technical Training Center, doing some work with the folks here at PPA today, and just knowing we had this scheduled tonight instead of having to rush home, I was able to utilize their conference room. So we thank PPA for that.
Great. And our guest this evening is Jason Esteves from Seitron Americas, and then let's welcome aboard. Hey, Jason, how are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Hey, Jason.
Very good. I can tell we are.
Well, I'm in my training facility here at beautiful Newtown, Pennsylvania, at the home of Seitron Americas. And because Alan just mentioned it, we just did a combustion class at PPA Tech. I don't even know what day it is. I think late last week. And we had the wonderful Doug here at our class earlier today.
Great. Nice room you have there. I've never been there. I'm going to have to stop by. Looks great.
It's always open. Anybody who wants to come in, I don't have them in the picture, but we do have live fire equipment here. So we did a class today, and it was really nice to have still, even with very cold weather, a nice full room of guys. And, we do live fire. So I tell any of my techs, if they're ever driving through the area or want to stop in, say hello, grab a cup of coffee and fire up something and do some testing, we're here.
Great. I won't pop in. I'll text first. I promise.
That'd be nice.
To be
fair, this time of year, we're never really here anyway. So if you pop in, it's very seldom you're going to find one of us.
I talk to a lot of people. A lot of people constantly talking to techs and other people, and it's mind-boggling how many people don't use combustion or any type of combustion testing whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we were talking before, and Jason said there's a lot more analyzer manufacturers than were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And there is, and it's actually good news because there's a lot of room for everybody to grow because there's a lot of guys not using them. Why is it important that people should use combustion analyzers is my question for you.
What a question to start me with. And I apologize if I look up sometimes. You guys are on a big screen for me, so it's easier for me to see it that way. Why is it not important? At the end of the day, whether we like it or not, we're liable for every piece of equipment we touch, right? So we want to make sure that equipment's running properly, safely. Yeah, efficiently is part of it. But, I was telling the story, and I tell it in my classes a lot. I haven't been in the industry all that long, I'm sure, compared to a lot of guys that are sitting here, 24 years now for me. And when I started, there were maybe 4 analyzer brands I remember. We just went to our biggest trade show at ASHRAE last year, and I walked the show the last day and counted about 14 different brands. Wow. So the market has expanded. Nobody, develops a new product for a few $1 million and goes out to a market that there's not a need for. So it's definitely changed for the better over a lot of the years that I've seen. But it's one of the few things that we still, in order to sell an analyzer, we find we have to go out to the field. We have to do training. We have to show guys how to use them, how to take care of them is a whole other topic of conversation. I'm sure we'll get into some points. But every piece of equipment is different. And I know tonight is we're very oil focused, but that's not the only fuel source we have, right? So we want equipment to run properly, and we show examples that, just because it comes from the manufacturer and it's not set at the factory, you have to make sure that we're burning right, make sure that you have multiple different basements or boiler rooms and all that kind of stuff. And it all plays a part in how we're going to burn. So having this equipment is essential. It's not even a luxury item anymore. I see manuals now where it's part of the required setup tools, and that's great to see.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't imagine going on a call without it. I don't understand how people, the good news, it's a double-edged sword. It's good news and bad news. The good news is a lot of room for you guys to grow. The bad news is a lot of people not using combustion analyzers today. But the good news is
there's a third one to that. There's a lot of guys who have them but don't really know how to use them or what the readings mean, right? So you have kind of three little prongs there. We don't have them. We have them. And yeah, that's a market I want to grow because the guys who have them and understand them and know how to operate them. And then there's this huge growing pocket of guys who, hey, okay, I use this manufacturer. They told me to get an analyzer. I got one. Now I got the readings. Now what? That's another aspect, right? So that's why we focus so much on training, because we want guys to be comfortable using them. And a lot of the features that we put in are different because, look, I haven't, I've been doing this a little while, and I'm pretty passionate about what I do and what we do for a living. We're a little bit different, some ways good and bad. But I say this old adage at every training that I do, and I really do mean it. As a market, what do I want my legacy, or what do we want our legacies to be in this field? And one of the things that I typically say is, look, the easier I can make equipment, the easier I can make instruments to use and to know what you're getting, the more likely guys are going to use them. The more likely guys are using them, the better equipment runs. The better equipment runs, the better market we have. So it's kind of like, well, where are you in this thing of this market? And we're here. We're at the beginning. We want to make sure that our instruments, not only do we train on what the readings mean, how to use them, but we implement things in the analyzers that, hey, it's not just you being out there now with these readings. We put in these little features and things into the analyzer that, hey, you pick the fuel, you pick the system you're running, and it kind of shows you where you should be. So it's a huge help for our techs in the field.
Oh, absolutely. Another one, a lot of people call up, they'll talk to them, you're having a problem. Well, it's 86% efficient, 87. They kind of they think it's an efficiency tester rather than efficiency number. And that's the least important number of it. That it's the number one function is probably safety.
Right. For sure.
You can go home and sleep at night. Knowing that, you're not going to endanger your customer.
Well,
not to mention your own liability with it. You mind touching on that, the safety factor? Like, what are you looking for?
So the funny part is when you talk CO and and different equipment have different ranges, right? So your oxygen on one piece of equipment might be different on a different fuel or a different equipment. 90%ers are going to run different than 80%er. So your oxygen levels you're looking for, your excess air levels are different. But I joke when you say that because there's no efficiency sensor in an analyzer. It's all calculated, right? But it's calculated from different things that the unit is reading. So every analyzer, for the most part, have two sensors. They have the oxygen sensor and the CO. And almost everything outside of that is calculated from those aspects, whether it's CO2, excess air, your efficiency, your losses, all the numbers that you see on your analyzers are calculated from the two sensors that are in there, typically. So, and a 90%er is going to run a little bit differently than this one. So you have different ranges for most different things. But yeah, efficiency, I laugh because when we go into combustion training, one of the first couple slides we go over is, well, first of all, there's two different efficiencies we're talking about. One is your combustion efficiency, which is at this date, at this time, under these conditions, under these parameters, at these ranges, this is how efficient your equipment's running today, which could be different, in May than in December. And then there's the other efficiency where we get caught up on, which is the yellow sticker on the side of the boiler. And that's your AFUE. That's your annual fuel utilization efficiency. That is pretty much, okay, under peak conditions, piped properly, everything at its peak, that is the highest it will see. It's not an average. It's not, this is what the boiler runs at all the time. This is the peak it ever sees. I kind of relate it to like my truck. I have a F-150, and when I went to the car lot and I bought my truck, everybody looks at the MPG sticker on there, and it's, okay, 35 miles per gallon on the highway. Well, if I live near Philly, most of my family's up in North Jersey, or my wife's family's down in LBI, down at the beach. I've never seen 35 miles per gallon, and I've had this truck for 10 years. So there's a couple different things of efficiency to look at, and that's just one very low thing on what an analyzer brings you. It's the safety part, and then also, what else are we creating? Sure.
So we touched the oxygen and the CO sensors.
Sure.
which is another big thing. Oil guys think in CO2. I do too. I mean, I learned that way. And even though O2 and CO2 are really the, mirror images of the same thing, I still can't think in O2. When someone says it's 5.0, I think, well, that's really, 11.6.
Yep.
Yeah.
The oil guys just kind of automatically translate it. In the liquid fuel business right now, the big thing is the move to renewable fuels,
Sure.
particularly biodiesel. And guys I feel this constantly every day. People get wrapped up in the different, biodiesel has an oxygen content versus hydrocarbons, that there's no oxygen. So it can have an impact on the combustion numbers.
Sure.
And they get super wrapped up on, should I leave it? Should I set it for number 2, even though I'm using B20, or maybe it's B50? I don't know. Maybe it's B80.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I tell them, if you're really that going to get wrapped up about it, it's really not a major issue. It's about a 0.3% in CO2 offset. But you can use the O2 number. The O2 number is going to be right no matter what you have it set on.
Yeah, that's the thing with analyzers, and I say that a lot too, is your analyzers don't care what fuel you're set to. You can set it from oil to kerosene to natural gas. It doesn't care when it comes to O2 and CO, because the analyzers have a built-in oxygen sensor and built-in CO. They're reading it directly regardless of what fuel you set it to. That's why I said before, those are the 2 sensors that are there. No matter what fuel you have, they're going to read what they're going to read. All the other stuff, the CO2, the efficiency, that's all calculated from what it reads. But that's a nice thing about having the O2 sensor on there, because, yeah, you're right. By the way, I learned myself when I started in the oil field, and I still have our wet kit here that we use in our, or at least I show. I don't really use it much anymore, but I show it in the class of where we came from and where we are. And, we all of us learned on CO2. So, and it's funny when guys call me, and that's usually the first thing they say when hey, my CO2 is blah, blah, blah. And I go, okay, that's great. I don't really care what's your O2, what's your CO, because that's what I'm kind of looking for more. We all learned that way. And that's where I think a lot of manufacturers now, I'm starting to see it much more in the manuals. When you go to the startup guide and the commissioning section, you're starting to see more of, okay, the ranges that they want you to have, it's not just CO2 anymore. It's CO2 and oxygen, or CO2 and CO. Because the reason for that is, when you first learn combustion, we teach the stoichiometric curve, which, if some of you know what that is, a stoichiometric curve in combustion is essentially combustion. And we show it in our class, and it's a big, beautiful, visual. And what happens is that CO2, the reason it's called a curve is CO2, which is also your efficiency curve, is a curve. So if you're at a certain point on both sides of the curve, you can be running either fuel rich and air rich and have the same CO2. Yeah. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
Now on oil, it's easy, because guess what? It's going to soot like hell and you're going to see it. But on other gases, you don't necessarily. So, and it happens sometimes when guys put a probe in the stack and all of a sudden it shoots up to 10,000 ppm and you're going, oh, my oxygen's 0. But your CO2 is still going to have a number there. But that curve is why we don't base it on CO2 anymore. We base it on the oxygen and CO, and it tells us more what side of that curve we're on.
Yeah, I mean, the curve is, you get CO on both sides of that curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Particularly on the liquid fuels end of it. I mean, it's excess air, too much excess air can give you CO as well as insufficient.
That's right.
You need to know what side of that curve you're on.
That's the name of our game. And there's a reason why when we went to electronics, we don't use, if you're in the electronic world, yes, CO2 is still a part of it because it's a part of our culture. It's a part of what we do. It's just how we were all taught. But it doesn't have the same effect that the actual sensors you have in the unit have, right? Because we started to realize, okay, CO2 is great, but that doesn't really tell us the whole story. And that's what it's called a combustion analyzer. At no point does it say efficiency analyzer or anything like that, or a CO2 meter.
Yeah.
It's a combustion analyzer. It analyzes the combustion process. And in the residential, like commercial world where we live for the most part, it's O2CO. When you start getting into more of the bigger commercial industrial boilers, then that becomes NOx, SOx, hydrocarbons, and other things, right? So I call the 2 E's of combustion: efficiency, which is kind of the HVAC residential like commercial world, and emissions. And that's more your NOx world and your bigger stuff. And you can't have the best of both worlds. You're either going to be more efficient, maybe emitting more, or you're going to be really super low on emissions, but your efficiency might not be where you want it to be. And that's because, guess what? The air we breathe is the same air that a boiler and a furnace breathe, and that's 20.9% oxygen and 78% nitrogen. So it's there. It doesn't disappear when we try to burn it. Like the nitrogen just doesn't disappear. So that's where that NOx stuff comes into play. So there's those two worlds.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned the smoke, which also brings another one. On the oil end of it, you have to use a smoke tester before using the combustion analyzer.
Oh, please, God, do. Oh, no, when you don't. I mean, it's clear as day.
Yeah, when you hit it with God knows what. But you see that a lot too, where guys won't do the smoke test for it. And I get it. You can get away with it 100 times. You can get away with it a couple hundred times. But that one time. So we just got a unit back in from one of my guys in New York. Literally, I think this was 2 days ago. And my service tech came up to me. He goes, "What do you want me to do with this?" And it was, I mean, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. It was sooted. I mean, every square centimeter of this thing was sooted, all inside. The sensors were caked. The water trap was shot. I mean, terrible. And I've been dealing with these guys for 12 years, so I know that obviously didn't do a smoke gun. So you're right. He probably did it 100 times, and the one time he did it, that analyzer became a trade-in because there was fixing that thing. At a certain point. Now, the funny part is in the oil side, because we get asked this a lot on, hey, what do we do for smoke? Or they'll see smoke in the analyzer and go, oh, it does smoke. I go, no. Every analyzer, for the most part, has a smoke reading inside. What that means is you manually take your smoke test and then you enter the number that you got so that when you have the printout of the report, that you have smoke on the report. It's not that it does it. So years ago, Testo and us were the only two companies that I remember, there could have been more, but the only ones I remember, that developed a digital smoke gun. Okay. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah. And they were great. But here's the problem. They were $500 or $600 and guys were like, oh, screw it. I'll just buy a $80, $100 smoke gun. So you develop this thing and you hope for the market because guys ask for it and then you give it to them and they don't want to pay for the technology. So we kind of just stopped it. The other thing that we have to, as a manufacturer, we have to notice too is that when you talk about, because the smoke gun's only used for oil, right? For the most part. Yep. And for us as a manufacturer, right? I mean, there's if you look at the world, or let's just take the U.S., there's a very small pocket of the oil industry within the U.S. Like, Maine to Virginia to Pittsburgh, like this beautiful little triangle of oil heat, which is, guess what? Why our national trade shows are Atlantic City, Connecticut, all that kind of stuff, right? And it's great. But you're developing something that is for a certain pocket of a market. So to continue to advance, to do something where guys aren't going to buy it, that's kind of why we all stopped developing it. So take a smoke tester first. And another funny part about this whole oil part of the world, this is also, I credit the oil industry tremendously. It's given me everything that I've ever wanted in life, and where I learned everything. It's funny when I travel and I go to places like Chicago and I go, yeah, I got oil heat at home. And they're like, what is that? And you're like, yeah, what do you mean? You like from your car? You just pour it? No, we actually have oil heat, but I have it at home and it's just a concept. But if you ever think about it, there's a reason. Combustion analysis, we joke about the wet kit, but the wet kit was the first combustion analyzer. It really was. Yeah. And that was it started in the oil field. When I was really young, I went to my first trade show and some guy walked by my booth and he goes, "Oh, I do gas. I don't need that shit." It's changed. Sorry. It's changed. but that's the oil industry is really the driving force behind combustion analysis. Really, really was. And there's a reason why Testo's in Jersey, Backrack is in Pittsburgh, we're in Philly, Woller's in guess what? If you look at where almost all of the manufacturers are, they're all in the Northeast for the most part. Because that's where it all started, and it grew from there. But I credit, the oil heat industry for really pushing the fact of, hey, use something to understand what's happening in the process.
The importance of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge. Oil, obviously, liquid fuels are a small part of the market, but it's still just about 5 million homes and buildings using oil. So it's pretty substantial.
Sure.
But
yeah, of
with
course.
smoke test, your point is taken. I tried one, and it was more work for less. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. The amount of you can do it manually. Sometimes they the best.
Yeah.
That's an item that was just. It's so easy, it works so well. It's so cheap, so easy.
Yeah. It's tried and true. Guys know how to use it. It's not that much physical force, and it just. No. But don't put your analyzer. And I love it when guys send it back like there's a problem with the analyzer, and I see this brand new white filter that's in there, and you open it up, and I go, come on, you're not doing it, and it happens because a lot of guys, especially in our field, they don't buy their own analyzer, so a lot of times they don't really take care of it either. So what does it matter to them if they soot it up? Who cares?
I've had experience with that myself. It's easy to make a mistake. Yeah. So
100%. 100%.
I'm in no position to throw stones.
No. I'm not trying. I'm just telling you from what I see on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been there and done that. And a similar thing, NOx filtration and CO. So almost all the analyzers have integral NOx filters.
Almost all. It started years and years ago where, so there's this thing in our market that's called crosstalk. And what crosstalk is NOx in your combustion process, right? Every combustion process has NOx. It's just how much is there. What it is, what you're producing when you produce NOx, because again, we breathe 78% nitrogen. NOx is a very acidic gas. It's, really, really what damages a lot of equipment, venting, and all types of stuff. So anyway, what happens in that acidity is when your analyzer is a pump, and when you're pulling the gases into the analyzer's reading, over time, that acidity will start to eat away at the CO the filter that's on the CO sensor, and we get this thing called crosstalk where you will actually read CO. It's reacting with the CO sensor. So it starts to read higher CO numbers when in actuality, it's not. You're reading both the CO and the NOx at the same time. So for instance, I could have two analyzers, and we have this great slide that we use in our class. And I show two analyzers side by side, right? One has a NOx filter on the CO sensor. The other one does not. The one that does have the NOx sensor, when we only apply NO gas, so nothing else, no oxygen, no CO, nothing. We only apply NO gas, that CO sensor is at 0 because all the NO, the NOx is filtered out. On the second unit, without that NOx filter, we were watching our CO go up to as high as 40 ppm. And there's no CO.
It's reading the NOx as CO.
Yeah, that's the crosstalk. So the crosstalk meaning it's reading NO as the CO on the screen, and then it also reads, in addition to that, if you're in the stack, the CO that's there. So if I want to be under 100 ppm, and my analyzer shows me 80 and my other analyzer shows me 10, if you're telling me that analyzer has a NOx filter, I'm going to believe the one that's 10 because it's filtering out the acidity and the NOx that's there. So, and not all analyzers have that. So you'll see if you not just ours, of course ours do, but if you're looking for an analyzer always on the brochure, they always have the ranges and specs of the sensors, and they're important and sometimes overlooked. The two things with a CO sensor you want to take into account if you're looking for an analyzer, a good analyzer, is number one, it will say NOx filtration on it. Some of them some analyzers will have it as an option, but be wary of what that is. But some of them will say, like, with NOx filtration. So you want that. It also makes the sensor last a hell of a lot longer because you're not replacing sensors as much because the acidity is not eating away at the sensor and shortening the sensor life. So that's one. The other thing to be very aware of is the range of the CO sensor. So sometimes guys will buy an analyzer and think, okay, well, it's got a CO sensor and the brochure says that it goes from 0 to 2,000. Okay. I mean, I can hit 2,000 by a little really, really easily. So, you want to look for a CO range that's higher, 4, 8,000, 10,000. Some of them, like ours and other brands, they have automatic pump cutoffs now, so you can't overrange the CO sensor. Technology on analyzers has come a hell of a long way since when they first came out. So sometimes a lot of the issues that guys have had in the past with analyzers aren't necessarily what happens on new equipment because new features, new capabilities are there to prevent some of the misuse or some of the damage done in the field that we've all learned from.
I think the NOx filter thing is important. We do a lot of field testing, and typically a well-running oil unit, liquid fuel unit, it's going to be single digits, if not zero. And then guys will send me printouts from stuff they've done. And same unit, same O2, and they'll be 30, 40, 50. And like something's not right here at that. And I think people need to be conscious of that. If you're in the market for an analyzer, just make sure you get one of the NOx. I think the bulk of them do at this point. But I mean, not all of them. I think something to be.
Yeah, we started noticing it years and years ago. I'm going back 15 years when all of a sudden you're starting to see more and more of our competitors include it. And so, because it started with nobody, and then it started as an option, these little NOx filters that you would put in the hose line. Nobody got them.
I remember that.
Right? But you remember the little purple little balls sometimes you would put on there, right? That was the NOx filtration. Right?
And you would see
well, in oil, you would see sulfur. There was also a sulfur filter, right? So now you have two things. So it was doing two things at once. Now with technology, it's built into the sensor for the most part. But be careful because I'll just say it as this: the cheaper the analyzer, the likelihood of them having that is very low.
Which offsets your number. Unit to zero or single digits being is big.
I can tell.
A big number.
If you want to be under 100 ppm, but you're reading 120 and somebody else is reading 80, you have a problem.
I would do it all the time. When I first got in Land, it was like 20s. Actually, recently got one in the 80s, a Lin analyzer, which Alan has it now. The giant box, weighed a ton.
In the museum.
It was so cool. And it was great up until it needed the first oxygen sensor, like 1986. And I think it was like $300 then, which is, $1,200 or something now. It was just non-viable. It wasn't going to work. But early 2000s, late 90s, when I got one that was really reliable and good, I would love to find another guy on a call that had on a job that had an analyzer we could compare the two because I had was it accurate? Wasn't it? I had no reference. No shameless plug for NORA. We're going to start BPI training, Builder Performance Institute training. First sessions next week. They require, which I think makes a lot of sense, and a lot of people don't do this, that the analyzer be turned on outdoors to calibrate on rather than in the boiler room.
If you come to my class, that's going to be a requirement because we're going to chant it when you leave.
Okay. So, it's mandatory for them, and I knew that it was, and I knew that it was a good idea, but it's cold out there, especially like today.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys,
I'd rather be safe than cold, right? So, and here's another kind of comparison that we do in our trainings where we show two analyzers, one turned on outside, one turned on inside the boiler room. And I usually, when I get to this point in the class, I ask the question two ways. Where should you turn your analyzer? And everybody outside all the time. Okay, let's get to the reality of life. Where do you? Inside in the basement, man. It's cold outside. I get the same thing. Every analyzer brand under the sun will tell you to turn it on outside because the instrument, when it's going through its countdown, is not warming up for you. It is calibrating itself. It's called an auto zero. It's automatically zeroing the sensors to the air you're in. So if I'm outside, typically, I should have 20.9% oxygen, 0 CO. If I'm in the boiler room or the basement, if there was carbon monoxide in the room, when you turn it on in the room, guess what it's going to show you? 0 for CO, because that's where you're setting the 0. So any analyzer, and some units when you turn it on, it'll say, make sure you're outside in fresh air, don't have the probes connected, all this kind of stuff, right? That's just part of it. So anyway, to go back to like in our one of our slides, I showed 2 analyzers, and they're both calibrated relatively the same with 2 of our demo units, and we said here's what happened when we turned one inside and outside. So the one that we turned on in the room showed 0 CO because it's 0 to that room. The one we turned outside, when we walked into the room, we were getting 9.4 ppm for CO already. So we were getting, in the residential like cutoff for carbon dioxide in the room is 9 ppm. So I was already, as I'm walking into the room, 9.4, I'm already higher than where I should be. But I wouldn't have seen that had I turned the analyzer on in the room. That's the difference.
Unless you had a personal CO monitor, which you should probably have.
There you go. Little shameless plug.
Perfect segue.
Yeah.
Again, I know a lot of people that use them. I did for a while, and then the 2 years goes pretty quick, and you forget, and you don't have it. But obviously, BPI requires everybody have a personal CO monitor when doing anything like that, and it really is a great idea. It's cheap insurance.
Yeah, it's the best. A personal detector, cheap plug like ours that we have. We're one of the few companies that that actually go off at 9 and 35 ppm, and that's because those are the ASHRAE and BPI ranges, right? Most detectors go off their first level is 35, which is good, but that is the 8-hour OSHA requirement. And I'm going to get to Alan's question here in a sec. But that little personal detector is $120. The only time I will allow you, if I'm ever out with our techs in the field, to turn on an analyzer in the room is if he's got a personal detector showing me 0. Then I go, okay, yeah, you could turn it on. And just because, if you don't mind, Alan asked me, do you recommend unplugging the hoses when it calibrates outside? I do. Reason being for me, if I'm doing 4 or 5 different tests throughout the day, there could be remnants of fuel or moisture within the line, right? So I don't want to have it plugged in when I do the auto zero. A lot of analyzers now, by the way, when you turn them off, if you have the probe and hoses connected, right, you turn it off, it goes to a post purge. So that concern isn't as big anymore, but I still, one of those things where like, look, man, I was taught and I was trained, you shouldn't have anything plugged in because I want to get air to that unit as soon as possible for those 60 seconds for it to calibrate outside. And I don't really care what make or brand you have. They all turn on and calibrate because you don't know where you're going to be in certain situations. So you want to be outside, and I prefer not to have anything plugged in when it's doing that just because I don't know what's left in the hose or the line. Why does steel... oh, sorry, I'm reading it as I go. Why does CO have to zero out every time the unit turns on? Well, because number one, like I said, it's going through an auto calibration every time you turn it on. So if I'm going to 4 different houses today, I don't know what's in each separate basement or what's going on. And you're not going to run it all day. So when I'm outside and I turn it on, it's going through that auto zero to make sure that we're set for pure, nice, fresh, clean air. And then when I walk into that particular application or room or boiler or whatever the case may be, I know what's going on in the air. It's also, to be honest with you, electrochemical sensors of every analyzer have a drift over time. If you actually read the manuals of almost every analyzer, it will tell you after about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, you want to turn it off and reset the auto zero because it has a drift. They're electrochemicals. So the more moisture you have, the more gases it's seeing over time, it will start after about 40 minutes, let's say, it will actually start to drift and they need to be reset. That's one of the reasons why whenever you turn an analyzer on, it resets itself. And that's a phenomenon with electrochemical sensors. What are your thoughts?
On the questions.
Yeah.
What's that?
Hot and heavy on the questions. We got another one from Tiger.
Good. What are your thoughts on letting the pump continue running as an additional hose purge? Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, most analyzers these days, when you turn them off, They usually have about a 30 or 40-second post-purge. So what it's doing is pulling all of the gases that are in the line and in the hose out of there. So it's kind of post-purging. I mean, you could, if you hit it with a lot of CO or you run into a situation where, combustion was real bad, maybe let it run, like, take the probe out of the stack, sit the probe on the ground, let the analyzer just run in air for a little while before you turn it off, giving it a little bit of extra time. But once it goes through that post-purge, that's usually enough. Your pump has a 1.2 liter, most analyzers go from 0.6 liters per minute to 1.2 liters per minute. That's depending on the equipment you have. For you to go through 5, 6, or 10 feet of hose does not take that long. So if it's 30 seconds or 60 seconds post-purge, that's enough to get that hose out of the line. That's also why when you put the probe in the stack, it usually takes about 20, 30 seconds for you to kind of get the numbers, is because that's, depending on the pump speed you have, is how long it takes to get through that hose, right? So that 30 or 40 or 50 seconds, if your analyzer does not have a post-purge, then yes, please let it run in fresh air before turning it off.
Yeah. Even if I can just add to that, throwing in the post-purge, and maybe it's just redundant. Again, one of them things I learned, and it just made sense that it didn't hurt, is that I usually teach this in class, that when you're done getting your sample, as you just suggested, Jason, you set it down, make sure it's setting it down somewhere it's not going to melt anything. Right. And I start cleaning up my tools, and I keep glancing over at my analyzer, and when I see that the reading is back to 20.9% oxygen, then I hit the off, which is still going to purge. But to me, it's just, I know I've taken that extra time to run some fresh air across the sensor.
No, that's a good way to do it. I mean, sometimes depending on the analyzer, depending on the sensor, because not everybody uses the same sensors, right? Yeah. So sometimes it won't come all the way back. You might see 20.7 and 3 ppm. Just turn it off. It's pretty much cleared for the most part. What you're seeing there is probably a little bit of electrical noise from the electrochemical sensor. And the whole purpose of then when you turn it back on, it resets the sensors again to 0.
Yeah.
Can we get clarification on personal CO detector at when it alarms? Mine goes off at 9. The new one goes off at 35. Yes. So our PM1, you can actually, there's a little program that you can even download from our website. You can set the parameters to whatever you want. The issue we have is some of our market wants 35 and 200. The old tried and true, those are the numbers. And some of our market want the 9 and 35. So what happens is sometimes if they buy it through coming to a class at PPA Tech or through True Tech or through some of these different websites that are affiliated with NCI, BPI, NORA, then we normally send out the ones already preloaded at 9 and 35. Sometimes guys buy them from another web store when we don't know. So we'll send out usually the 35 and 200 standard range. But because we have 2 requirements or 2 needs in the market for both ranges, depending on commercial or residential, we have the capability of setting the alarms at whatever you want. But, it's like I said, there's a little software program that you could download from our website if you want to reach out to me. And you can, it's a little infrared thing that you plug into the computer, and you can change your parameters for your ranges. You can even change it from normally their factory set where it says the CO reading on the screen. You could change it to how much time is left on the unit because they last 2 years, whatever.
Got another question.
Are the sensors different in a personal CO monitor versus a combustion analyzer? Yes. Okay. They're for the most part electrochemical, but the ranges are completely different, right? Because your personal detectors typically have a smaller range because their accuracy wants to be much tighter. So the typical personal detectors are like 0 to 400 or 0 to 300 or 0 to 500, whereas a combustion analyzer, now the accuracy changes because it's a scale. Your sensors are 0 to 2,000, 0 to 4,000, 0 to 8,000. So there's different types of sensors, yes, or different qualities of sensors for sure. Hey, by the way, your CO sensor on an analyzer costs $200 to $300 to replace. The personal CO detector is $125. So yes, of course, there's 2 different levels of sensors, right? That's kind of why the price is different too. Personal detectors typically don't have that much of a drift. And that's because it's usually used in ambient conditions. You're in air, right? So there's not much going on. Whereas a combustion analyzer, you're putting it into a 300-degree stack producing, I don't know how much NOx, and you have acidity, you have moisture, condensation that you're pulling in. So the two types of sensors are used in two totally different types of applications. So yeah, the sensors and the accuracies are going to be a little bit different. However, if you don't have a personal detector, when you turn your analyzer on in fresh air, as I just mentioned to you before, you can use your analyzer as a personal detector before you do a test, because you're walking into the room or walking into the basement or whatever, and it's detecting what's in the air. That the pump is running. That's what it's doing. So you want to detect actually, that's kind of the step-by-step process on how we teach guys how to use an analyzer. Turn it on outside, walk into the home or to the basement, to the building, make sure there's no CO in the room, make sure there's nothing going on. Maybe even take your probe while it's connected and run along the venting just to make sure there's no leaks. Then do your combustion analysis, because once you do your analysis, you're reading at higher levels and you have all those other things in the process. So, taking it out after that point to do an ambient CO test, you'd have to reset the zero again. But two different methods of testing, two different applications, two different price points. So I hope that answered the question. I don't see another one. So they were coming in hot and heavy.
Yeah, they were. And good questions.
Well, while we're on the CO topic, air-free versus as measured, the two numbers, the straight CO and the air-free. What's the difference between the two of those?
Yeah, and it depends on who you ask and who likes what. So the easiest way to kind of decipher the two, because almost every analyzer I know has both numbers, right? Both numbers on the unit, on the screen, both numbers typically on the printout as well. The difference between, we call CO as measured, because guess what it is? It's as measured. It's what you're measuring based on the application, mixing with the oxygen and everything else that's there. It's as measured. CO air free is a calculated value where let's say you have, 50 ppm of CO and 5% oxygen, just to say something, right? The CO air free is, well, what if I remove the oxygen from that reading? Your CO is always going to be higher. That's why your CO air free is always higher, because now it's calculating the reading based on air free without oxygen. So that's that. It depends on, who's teaching and what they prefer. I'm more of the preference is as measured, because that's really what's happening in the process. I've heard good arguments for both. I prefer the as measured, just because, typically I want to see under 100 ppm, depending on the equipment, as measured. And with CO air free, and this gets confusing a lot sometimes with guys because I'll ask a question in class sometimes and say, well, what's a good typical range for CO? And I'll hear 400. And I go, whoa, you must be talking about air free, right? Because that's not CO as measured. So it's like having 2 cups. Everybody uses this analogy, but I'll use it anyway. You have 2 cups of coffee. They both have 12 ounces of coffee in it, right? One, you pour like cream or milk into it. It still has 12 ounces of coffee. You just diluted it with milk. But the diluted one is what's actually happening in the process, because you have oxygen there. So that's kind of the one that I focus on more, just because that's, how I learned, but that's the true happening of the combustion process, because I'm not going to leave this with zero CO. With zero oxygen. You're going to have oxygen.
Yeah.
So I prefer the as measured.
Yeah, the 400, when he mentioned, was probably that's the ANSI spec.
Yeah.
If you see a spec like that, which is really why I asked the question, they're always referring to air free.
Of course. If you see anything above 100 or 200, you're talking about air free, not as measured.
Yeah, it's actually, using your analogy, if you had 50 ppm CO and 50% excess air, right, it would just be 50% higher. You can take the excess air number and add that
That's
number.
what it is. You're just removing the oxygen and going. So and we get asked that a lot, because guys look sometimes, just going back to that third pillar I was saying about, where guys have analyzers, but they really don't know what the readings mean yet. and I say yet because we do a good job of training, and that's kind of what our focus is.
Yeah.
But they'll look at, and I get it a lot because I give out my cell phone number. So guys text me and go, what the hell? Look at the CO. I go, okay, that's the year free. Based on the rest of the other readings, it looks okay. But you have to explain what the differences are on both. And what's great, what's happening is, based on guidelines and you'll see two different manufacturers. One will have as measured in their book and one will have air free. So guess what I have to do, and every analyzer company has to do as well. We got to put both now on the analyzer because we don't know which one our tech is looking at.
Yeah.
In the liquid fuels, we really don't get super high excess air levels generally versus atmospheric gas appliances. It could be 300% excess air.
Yeah, sure.
Generally, hopefully it's, we're in the 30, 40% range or no more than that. But I mean, even at 50 or 60%, it's not going to be a huge jump where, other appliances could have tremendous excess air. So I get it.
Sure.
But any like ANSI specs, BPI specs, any other specs are always going to be air specs they're talking about.
For sure.
Thank you.
I saw one comment. If I don't mind, I'm going to jump on it because he mentioned Tom mentioned hoses could be frozen. Totally. This I want to bring it up because this is a very common question we get to, on using analyzers and the kind of care of instruments. So I know I do it myself. My analyzer sits in my truck all night. I mean, it just does. I could be told, and I do it myself 1,000 times a Sunday. Bring it in at night. Bring it in at night. Bring it in at night. I don't feel like it. It's going to stay in the truck most of the time. So yeah, it's electronics at the end of the day, right? So I'm more concerned about the analyzer, not so much the hoses, but I know it's been sitting in the cold. So what I do typically is I leave it in the cab of my truck if I can. And then, I maybe because I have a rechargeable cord, so I plug it in like I plug in my cell phone, and I turn the heat on, and it's acclimating itself before I go to use it. My problem with a lot of electronic analyzers that guys run into, and it's very common, it's just that they take this cold electronic out of the back of the truck, and again, we turn it on when it's ready to be tested right in the boiler room, and it counts down 30, 60 seconds, and then we put the probe in the stack. And then the analyzer doesn't like it. And you go, well, yeah, because it's a very cold computer that we're shocking with a very hot stack. So I jokingly say in my classes, okay, you have a cell phone. I could see it in front of you, right? Like sitting in my class, like you see behind me, I see a phone or a tablet on the desk. And I go, all right, you have that, right? You ever leave that in the truck overnight? Yeah, of course, Okay, the next morning, preheat your oven to about 325 degrees. Go grab your phone or your tablet and put it in the oven. And everybody stares at you and laughs like, that's crazy. And I go, but that's what you do to your analyzer. You take this cold electronic computer, that's expensive, by the way, and then you turn it on in the room and think it's going to warm up, and in the 60 seconds it's counting down. And then we do that. And what happens to inside the unit and inside the hose, that's where condensation forms, because taking something really hot, bringing it into something really cold. And then that's how a lot of sensor failures and moisture inside the unit can happen. So what we do is we try to teach the process, right? So even if the unit's been sitting in the truck cold all night, if I take it out of the back of my truck the next morning and I turn it on outside and it does its 60-second countdown, it's really slow and it's foggy because it's cold. But I walk into the boiler room, it's still measuring CO because CO doesn't care what the weather is. It's just looking for that. But my pump is running. So as I go into the basement or the boiler room, while I'm doing a cleaning or while I'm taking my smoke, whatever I'm doing, it's actually drawing in warm air from the room and acclimating itself before I put it in the stack. So if we get to the process of where to turn it on all the way through, the analyzers tend to last a lot longer, and you don't have a lot of sensor issues because of the process. It's not always the unit, it's the process.
Great, thank you. Another question.
So I know you answered this on Chatter, but Alan was thinking it wouldn't be a bad idea to follow up in this live version as well. There might be others that were looking forward to hearing the answer.
Sure. And I apologize if you post something online. I don't always go on there all the time, so apologies. I try to, but social media. So I I can only take so much sometimes. But I apologize if I didn't answer the question right away. But the question was pretty much, so we launched on our Novo series 2 incredible new features over the last, I would say, year and a half. One is the combustion assistant. It's a pro mode, we call it. And on the unit, it's a first of its kind where you can tell it what fuel you're burning and what type of a system you're running on. So a 90% boiler furnace running on gas or propane or whatever, an 80% oil, whatever the case is, right? And to NORA's credit, we have most of the mixtures for you guys in already set up in our unit. From B5, B20, B40, B80, I think B100, most if not all. And we're always adding stuff too. But anyway, that feature then allows, what happens is when you set the fuel and you set the type of equipment you're running, it shows up on the screen as a green, red, go, no go for O2, CO2 draft, and temperature, stack temp. So it's kind of giving you a guideline of where you should be, which is a very cool, unique feature, and how guys, I said before that I want it to make it easier for technicians to use and understand. Secondly, was a big hit over the last year is the cracked heat exchanger test. Now, we've been teaching this forever, and if you have an analyzer of any type, you can do this. Yeah. But we just put it into kind of the analyzer to make it easier, one, to see it, and two, it's a much easier conversation I have to have with a homeowner if I can go, well, here it says it's cracked or not cracked, right? So that's one of the reasons. And we work with a couple different groups throughout the country, one of them being heat exchanger experts, which are wonderful good group of guys who teach just on this kind of stuff. And it's funny when we get to this in my training classes and we get to the cracked heat exchanger and I go, okay, I turn around to the board and I go, guys, tell me how we check for a cracked heat exchanger. And to everybody's credit, nobody's wrong, but I've heard a lot of different ways. And sometimes you write 6, 7, 8 things on the board. CO, draft, looking at the flame, whatever the case may be. And again, we're not wrong. But there's a really tried and true way to do it, and that's by looking at oxygen and excess air between the blower on and the blower off.
Yep.
And with the blower on, if I'm getting 5.5%, with the blower off, if I'm getting 5.5% oxygen, that's what I should be getting when the blower kicks on. It should be stable. That crack, it's pulling oxygen into the heat exchanger and going up the stack, and your analyzer is showing you the increase. The difference is how much of an increase are we looking for? That's the question that, okay, some guys know to do it this way, but they don't know how much is too much or how much is too little. Yeah. And the guideline is about 0.5% of oxygen. If I see an increase of O2 of about 0.5% or more than likely there's a crack in the heat exchanger. So the question that came up was, he was using the analyzer and didn't know how long to do the test for, what to look for, because it was just, going on he was going on for the test for way longer than it needed to be. But anyway, it doesn't take that long. It's just a matter of looking at it beforehand, looking at it afterhand. You're just looking for the difference. It's not like you need to be there for 10 minutes looking for it. It usually takes seconds.
Great. It's a nice feature to quantify it.
Yeah. To show somebody, hey, now I can, if I walk up to your house, right, and I tell you have a cracked heat exchanger, number one, my likelihood of showing somebody something, winning the job is going to go up because I now have credibility in what I'm showing you. I'm not just telling you, I'm showing you. And it also makes my tech's life easier because I'm showing you. I'm not guessing, it's here. It's showing you that on the screen whether there's a crack or no crack. And if you on our website, there's a link to our YouTube channel. We have a cool new video on the heat exchanger test. So and sometimes it happens really quickly. So you might have to disconnect the blower motor temporarily to see the difference if it happens too fast. But typically, you'll see the difference of 0.5%.
No, I've seen it a lot higher than that, and very rapid. Yeah, the blower comes on, and it's it's seconds, and there's no doubt.
Yeah.
To be honest, you knew it was cracked anyway, but you just want to.
You want to prove. Exactly right. So we had one situation recently where I had a technician we were doing a test, and he thought that everything was fine because His oxygen with the blower off was 8.9%, if I remember correctly, and his CO was 29.4. Okay, pretty recent. I remember the numbers right away. So 8.9, 29.4. When the blower came on, the O2 jumped to 11.1, and the CO went from 29.4 to 59. He didn't catch it, nothing against it, but he didn't catch it because he was looking for CO greater than 100 ppm, because that's what we were always taught, high ranges of CO. And I said, yeah, but you have a crack in the heat exchanger. Like your oxygen went up about 2%, which is a lot. Your CO doubled. Even though it's under 100, it still doubled. Went from 29 to 59. And then what's going to happen is 6 months or a year later, that's when you're going to start to see it go from 59 to 500. That's that you want to catch it early, right? So those are those little things. And a lot of guys in our industry have been teaching that. So like, I have guys that come to my class and they go, well, I have a Testo 310 or this. I go, yeah, you can do it. Watch your O2. There's a reason why your analyzer has an O2 sensor in there. It's important. It tells you a lot more. Your analyzer does a lot more than just looking for CO2 inefficiency. That's where kind of we started. It's a lot more than that.
Oh, for sure. And getting back to using an instrument, maybe like if you went to the doctor and you said, yeah, you look like you have high blood pressure without actually testing. That's what you're doing without a combustion analyzer. You're diagnosing without the information you need to diagnose it.
It's so funny that you say that, because that's one of the things that I do in class. I go, imagine you go to the doctor and he looks at you and he goes, Jay, I've been doing this for 20, 30 years, because I heard that a lot over my life. Son, I've been putting in boilers longer than you've been alive. If I had $1, I wouldn't have to do this anymore. But imagine going to your doctor and he goes, yeah, I've been doing this a long time. You look good. Okay. The reason we do blood work is to see what's going on behind the scenes, the things that we can't see. And that's what a combustion analyzer does, whether it measures O2, CO, draft, your stack temperatures. It's telling you all the things that's happening to make sure you're on the right side of the curve. We sometimes, like I said, with oil, it's we go by the eye test a lot over the years with soot and things like that, or the color of the flame, which drives me nuts. The color of the flame thing. I mean,
it's the optical CO2 sensor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I like to see the actual numbers of what's happening.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but that's the historic system. Anyway, I think we're just about there. Any questions remaining? And we can wrap it up and call it an evening.
Yeah, I don't see any new ones. I would just like to interject something, if I may, regarding the heat exchanger test.
Oh.
Not to be Mr. OCD here or whatever you want to call it, but I often teach, and I think it's worth, and I don't remember if we still have it in the most current edition of the NORA book, Bob, but you might remember this. There definitely was a section on it, is that it absolutely validates it, but in the technician's mind, what I try to teach is before you run upstairs, what this test just validated is for you to go a little deeper and
Yes.
check things, because it could be a loose clean out. It could be it could be something simple. So don't run upstairs and tell the customer they need a new heating system. They call somebody else to come look. They check and find it's a loose clean out, and now they think you were trying to sell them a piece of equipment. So I just like to make sure, since we're talking about this, and
it's a great point, and that's why the analyzer doesn't say cracked heat exchanger.
that's right.
It says crack detected.
That's
Now,
right.
There's a leak somewhere.
You might have to do a little bit more work into that. So one of the biggest companies that we work with here in Philly, they go, this is your first step. You do this test as a first step, as a time saver too, to, hey, what's going on? And then we further investigate. It's a great first step, but it helps us to understand if things that we can't see.
Sounds good. I guess. Thank you, Alan.
You bet.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I think we're ready to call it an evening.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for your time. It really
Thanks
fun.
for being here. Thanks everybody for popping in and listening.